The core, the heart, the fabric, the main component of NFL rosters is built on day 2 of the NFL draft. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We are here for you for the next several minutes or hours, depending on your phone calls and your comments and questions to the live chat. So welcome in post day 2 of the NFL draft, rounds 2 and 3. We will go pick by pick through the selections made, starting with Jacksonville at number 33 overall, the first selection of the second round. Everybody welcome in. We invite you in to call us at 860-499-3332. Again, with your comments and questions about the NFL draft or anything concerning college football, even though this is NFL draft weekend. Of course, on Saturday is a huge spring day around college football, and we will be here throughout the day to give you spring reports with Nebraska, Notre Dame, and others on the field. But for tonight, again, it's the NFL draft. You don't have to call about the NFL draft, but that's our topic for the night with rounds 2 and 3 in the books. And again, statistics show year after year after year, organization upon organization builds its roster. The main component of its roster, both in terms of volume and in terms of the bulk of the roster, the most number of starters are drafted, signed from day 2 of the NFL draft. All right, let's get underway. Let's see who's on the line with us. Of course, do your Amazon shopping using the link that we provide in the description section of any of the videos. So I was just talking to somebody just a few minutes ago regarding revenue streams for the voice of college football. And I said, if people would only grasp that they could contribute absolutely nothing out of their pockets, but they could contribute by using Amazon, using the link that we provide. Mr. HD, 43 picks in that third round. La Potencia. Mark, do you think Zach Wilson will lead the Jets to a Super Bowl? Well, if you were going to hold a gun to my head and say, Mark, your life depends on correctly selecting whether Zach Wilson would lead the Jets to a Super Bowl or not, well, the odds are against him. The Jets, even if they do everything right, will not have a Super Bowl team for about 3 years at the very least. So right out of the gate, 3 years of his career is going to be wasted toward that quest. Or at least is not going to produce that quest. So the odds say that Zach Wilson, and the odds say that none of those quarterbacks, if given the odds for any given quarterback, will lead their team to the Super Bowl. It's stacked against each one of them, just like it's stacked against everyone. But the odds say that one of them out of the 5 in the first round will lead his team to a Super Bowl. Zach Wilson, he's an interesting commodity. He's an interesting talent with a huge ceiling that plays the game in a very loose manner. Not that he's not protective of the football, but he can throw the football from various arm angles, and he's a creative quarterback. He's not super speedy, but he's dynamic. He's elusive. He is certainly faster than most. And again, he can throw from different arm angles and has a plus arm. Not a rocket, not the top end arm, but he has got a plus arm. Let's toast media. Go Blue, Michigan, go Steelers. And the Steelers with an interesting draft thus far, trying to give Ben Roethlisberger a triumphant ride into the sunset. Good to see you. Let's toast media. Bama boy, roll tide. And man, if there's a school that owns the NFL draft right now, it's Alabama. It's been Alabama along with Ohio State and LSU and others in recent years, but this draft is owned by Alabama, and that's not going to change. Alabama, of course, tying Miami's 2004 record of 6 first-round selections. And then it only took a couple picks into the second round with Christian Barmore for Alabama to get back on the board. Tabardine continues to live in another universe. Hey, Brian, good to see you. Leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the live chat. Also, keep in mind that our number's displayed on the ticker below, 860-499-3332. Cheryl's here. Good to see you. La Potencia is Elijah Moore, number one receiver. We haven't had one since Brandon Marshall. I don't know if Elijah Moore is a number one receiver, but he's going to be, I would think, most likely a darn good number two receiver. He's not necessarily got the body type, size to be the number one guy. He's a bit on the smallish side. But I expect him to be hugely productive at that level. All right, here we go. Let's go through the picks. Round number 2 started with more from the SEC. After the SEC had 12 selections in the first round, of course, 6 of those from Bama. 12 in the first round, the Big Ten with 7, and the ACC with 6. Jacksonville takes Tyson Campbell, cornerback from Georgia, with pick number 1 in the second round. Tyson Campbell, of course, entered this process at Georgia as one of the top recruited players in the nation and one of the top rated players in high school football, and is, as is the case much of the time, the best players in high school football 3 to 4 years later become the best players leaving college football. There's Elijah Moore going to the Jets at number 2 in the second round, 34th overall out of Ole Miss. The workload that Elijah Moore took on at Ole Miss was astounding. He was targeted percentage-wise more than anyone in college football. He caught something like 86 passes this past season, and he was targeted constantly. He was the guy in the offense, and he continued, despite the double coverage, to be the guy and find his way to get open, out-fight, out-battle defensive backs for the ball. Denver gets a huge plus at running back via North Carolina with selection number 3 in the second round, Javonte Williams. Did you check out the highlights? If you have yet to see Javonte Williams play, check out the highlights specifically from the Miami, North Carolina game. Javonte Williams is a beast. He goes to Denver. Javon Holland, very capable, both safety and return man for Oregon, goes to Miami with the 36th selection. Landon Dickerson had a horrific injury to conclude the 2020 season for him, did not play in the playoffs. And Landon Dickerson, a bit of a gamble from a health standpoint, started his career at Florida State and is selected by Philadelphia. New England and Bill Belichick are very comfortable with taking Alabama players, very comfortable with knowing how they have been discipled by Nick Saban and his staff. Goes to the well again. So Nick Saban, or Bill Belichick, after taking Mac Jones in the first round from Alabama, goes back to Bama for Christian Barmore, defensive tackle, just a stalemate, stalwart, stout player in the middle for Bama. Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle, Oklahoma State, a pretty limited player, but should be a dependable, reliable player for the Chicago Bears. They have offensive line issues across the board. All right, Bama Boy says, Mark, where did Trask wind up going in what round? We're making our way through the picks. I may have missed that one, actually. Jobo, good to see you. Follow along. Call me, anybody, if you'd like, 860-499-3332. Otherwise, I'm going through all the picks. As mentioned there, yes, Landon Dickerson left FSU to give his career a smart move. All right, yeah, we'll get to the pick with Trask to Tampa Bay in the third. We're working our way through. La Potencia hit me up with, do you think the Jets should have traded their 23rd overall pick for... No. Nobody should be trading, especially with a young team trying to develop toward a winner. Nobody at this point should be trading anything valuable, meaning draft picks are valuable, especially in the first round for OBJ. No, No. Learn from the Browns and Odell Beckham Jr.'s late portion of his career with the Giants. Learn from that. No. Stay away, keep your draft picks, and make smart selections with those picks. You're a young team, you own a draft. The Jets have so much ground to cover. Keep your picks, build your team. You're not one player away. Richie Grant, UCF safety. It went to the Atlanta Falcons at pick number 40. Levi Onwuzurike of Washington, defensive tackle, goes to Detroit at 41. Liam Eichenberg, offensive tackle, to Notre Dame. Of course, the Irish have turned out some of the better offensive lines in college football over the last 3 to 4 years, and Eichenberg is the latest example. Then they had another offensive lineman taken a round later, Eichenberg to Miami. Trevon Moehrig was the Thorpe winner, had ridiculous numbers at TCU this past season with 7 interceptions, a ton of tackles for a cornerback, and 18 passes defensed. He goes to the Raiders, who need so much defensive help, especially on the back end. And so TCU supplies the Raiders with Trevon Moehrig. Dallas takes Kelvin Joseph from Kentucky, a cornerback, really, really exceptional player. Walker Little, who was the number 1 rated player at the offensive tackle position coming out of high school, is selected by Jacksonville out of Stanford. College football fans you'll be familiar with, whether you root for Clemson or Ohio State, be familiar with Jackson Carman. Very talented player out of Clemson, originally committed to Ohio State, played for the Clemson Tigers, played in all those playoff and national championship games, goes to Cincinnati to help protect Joe Burrow. Jackson Carman had a bit of a disappointing season and career at Clemson. It was still good enough to get him drafted in the second round of the NFL draft. So I'm not discouraging it to that degree, but he wasn't a dominant force for Clemson. Asante Samuel was projected by many to be a first rounder. He slid in a pick number 47 out of Florida State to the Chargers at cornerback. One of Florida State's few bright spots in recent seasons. Aaron Banks, guard, Notre Dame. There's another Notre Dame offensive lineman. Aaron Banks, guard, goes to San Francisco. Rondell Moore, one of the most exciting players in college football. We just didn't get to see enough of him. He opted out of the pandemic year. Then he came back after a few games and only played a couple games. Purdue only played 6 total, and Rondell Moore opted out of the first 2 or 3. So he only played about 3 games for Purdue this past season. Of course, he was injured the previous season. He had his one huge year in 2018 as a true freshman. Ohio State fans will remember one of his biggest games. Arizona takes Rondell Moore at pick number 49. And for a wide receiver at his stature, has enormous trunk and thighs. Rondell Moore. The Giants took Azeez Ojulari, coming off the edge at Georgia. They showed some of his highlights, of course, on the networks tonight. He had some ridiculous plays off the edge in which he was able to bend around the tackle, get to the quarterback, strip him, make big plays. The Giants take Ojulari. The Washington football team, when is that going to get corrected? Anyway, the Washington football team takes Sam Cosmi, the offensive tackle from Texas. We also have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame. Everybody loves this guy as a leader, as a character guy, as an athlete as well. And he goes to the Cleveland Browns as well at pick number 52. Dylan Raduns, offensive tackle, North Dakota State. I don't know much about him. I don't follow the FCS. Goes to Tennessee. Indianapolis takes Dayo Odeyingbo, defensive end from Vanderbilt. Penn State, Pat Freiermuth, productive player. And Penn State churning out the NFL tight ends, and Mike Gesicki, and now Pat Freiermuth, who was one of their top signees a couple of years ago, stuck around through the pandemic and had a nice season for Penn State after a big year the previous season. Dwayne Eskridge. Louis Riddick and the boys went crazy about Dwayne Eskridge, wide receiver from Western Michigan, and his speed, top-end speed and explosiveness. Goes to Seattle, and the Seahawks are piling up speedy talent. Los Angeles Rams at pick number 57 go Tutu Atwell, wide receiver, Louisville. At 100 listed, Tutu Atwell at 153 pounds. And so in the breakdown, he was compared to, and it was determined that he might have to take on some of the role of Cooper Kupp, but he's not going to be able to block 153 pounds. Tutu Atwell, that's going to be an interesting process in getting him in the game and getting him the football in space. Of course, he's lightning quick, fun to watch, but there's an issue there in trying to use him to fulfill other roles and not making it obvious that he's in the game to get the football, and that's it. Nick Bolton's a tremendous linebacker, tackling machine out of Mizzou, goes to the Kansas City Chiefs at 58. Terrace Marshall, we saw his work along with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, who just turned in an exceptional year, offensive rookie of the year in the NFC by the Minnesota Vikings. But Terrace Marshall goes to Carolina, team up with Sam Darnold there. Pete Werner, New Orleans Saints. You hear that, Cheryl? Pete Werner, Ohio State linebacker, goes to pick 60 and the New Orleans Saints. And I think it surprised some people at the pro days how athletic Pete Werner is. And there was a bit of a discrepancy on the set as to whether Werner would just be a downhill running game linebacker who could plug it up and make tackles and work from sideline to sideline and fill the gaps and make the tackles, a sure tackler. But can he get downfield and pick up backs and tight ends? On tape, it doesn't appear so, but the speed at the combine or at the pro day would say that Pete Werner is capable of doing that. Boogie Basham out of Wake Forest. I've always liked this guy. Tremendous edge rusher. Off the corner, goes to Buffalo. Green Bay takes Josh Myers, center, Ohio State. Another Ohio State center going to the NFL, probably going to prosper. And speaking of centers, a very impressive player in Kansas City's Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma. Wow. Creed Humphrey was so good and so prepared to play college football that he was pretty much the leader of that unit once he showed up at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley said, this guy is so smart and such a leader. He's taken over the line unit already, and he will be sorely missed by Oklahoma. And then to finish out the second round is Kyle Trask, as was mentioned in the chat by Jobo. Tampa Bay takes Kyle Trask so he can stay close to home there at Florida and actually play pretty much down the street from where he played in high school, from what I remember. Yeah, the Rod Farva saying Pete Werner going in the second round was stunning. He can't cover anyone. Louis Riddick said the same thing, and Louis Riddick was basically gushing about everybody. And I don't say that in a critical way because I gained a whole lot from listening again to Louis Riddick. I think he's exceptional. But Mel Kiper disagreed and thought that Pete Werner could be an every down linebacker. Mr. HD, they made up for it with Joseph Asai in the third round, so it's all good. Yeah, Rod, Josh Myers, Miamisburg High School, my alma mater. Okay, very nice. Yeah, Uncle Lou, Trask not good enough to play in high school, good enough to play in the SEC. I don't think, I'm just taking a stab here, I don't believe that he's going to be good enough to play his first year with Tampa Bay. I think there might be a quarterback competition that's just a bit above his pay grade. Possibly, from what I understand out of this Tampa Bay quarterback room. SEC Dog, good to see you, man. All right, we have covered ground through the second round of the NFL draft. Let's move on to the third round that lasted forever. There were so many compensatory picks, and it started with safety Andre Cisco out of Syracuse going to Jacksonville at pick number 65. Now, Syracuse has been awful the past couple seasons. They won one game last year. Apparently, Andre Cisco can play, though. Do I know much about him? No. All right. Moving on to Minnesota taking Kellen Mond. Okay, Kellen Mond helped himself considerably this year with more consistent play. He piled up a lot of statistics, but very uneven performances his first 3 seasons at College Station. Then Kellen Mond really turned it on this year, played much more consistent, and then he showed out for the scouts at the Senior Bowl and in the Pro Day, and his stock shot up. For Kellen Mond to get into the first couple picks of the third round to Minnesota, that would have never been guessed by anybody a year ago. Uncle Lou, Dan Mullen, quarterback whisperer, and Prescott is best he can do. That's pretty good. I think Dak Prescott's earning a paycheck that's going to cover the bills, I believe. Davis Mills out of Stanford. Now, David Shaw was touting him, but I don't know that that necessarily counts. He goes to Houston. Jalen Mayfield. My Michigan guys really brag about Jalen Mayfield being ready to play in the NFL right now. He's going to play for the Atlanta Falcons and try to protect Matt Ryan, who, of course, is a pretty immobile, aging quarterback who's got a few years left. I was always impressed with this guy, edge rusher out of Texas, Joseph Asai, as being a beast. If you want to see his best work, go to the Oklahoma State game last year. He was immense in that one and basically single-handedly won the game, pressuring the quarterback, running down backs from the backside, strip sacks, batted balls in the air, an interception, everything across the board. Joseph Asai, I know that's one game, but he goes to Cincinnati, pick number 5 in the third round. Brady Christensen, offensive tackle, BYU, goes to Carolina. Aaron Robinson, UCF cornerback. A lot of secondary talent at UCF. We think of UCF as an offensive school, and they are, but producing the NFL talent in the secondary. Giants take Aaron Robinson. Okay, Detroit, Aleem McNeil, defensive tackle, North Carolina State. And North Carolina State does little outstanding, does North Carolina State, but they do produce defensive linemen. This is one of the many drafts in which they have produced a multiple of defensive linemen in the NFL draft. Philadelphia, Milton Williams, defensive tackle, Louisiana Tech, Washington football team. Love that name. They should stay with that. It's unique. Generic and boring, but unique. Benjamin St. Juste, cornerback, Minnesota. Oh, yeah. I saw him play quite a bit, of course. Watch a lot of Minnesota football, of course. Absolutely. Dallas, Osa Oduzuwa, the defensive tackle from UCLA. Paulson Adebo, the cornerback from Stanford. New Orleans Saints. Chargers take Josh Palmer, wide receiver, Tennessee. And if you can get drafted by playing wide receiver at Tennessee after the god-awful quarterbacks that they've had playing there, Jared Garantano being the primary one over the past few years, congratulations, Josh Palmer, that you made it out of Tennessee as a wide receiver and got drafted in the third round. Okay, love this next pick and love this next player. Chaz Surratt, linebacker, North Carolina. Played quarterback. The team needed a linebacker. He played linebacker. He played safety. He plays everywhere. He's a menace, an athlete, a freak, all over the place. Led the ACC in a number of categories the last couple seasons and was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. Goes to the Vikings. LA Raiders take Malcolm Kuntz, edge rusher, Buffalo. And I'll remind everyone, it's down on the ticker there, 860-499-3332. Shop Amazon. Use our link in the description section of the videos. Same shopping experience, folks. And also, you can join us on Patreon, as somebody did earlier today. Thank you so much for that Patreon membership. Divine Diablo, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is not going to have nearly the impact in the NFL draft over the next few years that they've had this year. They had 2 first-rounders. Virginia Tech, one of just a few schools after Alabama pretty much owned the first round, took over the first round, and then you had a number of schools with 2 number 1 picks, including Virginia Tech. Now Virginia Tech is bringing in recruiting classes that are ranked 55th, 60th in the country. So don't expect a whole lot like this out of Virginia Tech in the NFL draft for the next few years. But Divine Diablo is a good player, safety out of Virginia Tech. Hunter Long, tight end, Boston College, going to be missed by Phil Jurkovec. BC quarterback, really good player, Hunter Long. He would not have been anywhere close to this selection in the NFL draft had Jeff Hafley not taken the reins at Boston College. Steve Addazio was the coach, ran an outdated mundane offense. Jeff Hafley comes in from Ohio State. They signed Phil Jurkovec from Notre Dame, get him to transfer. They upgrade the offensive skill position. Hunter Long goes from being a disregarded tight end to 57 catches, 3rd-round pick in the NFL draft to Miami. De'Ami Brown, exceptional playmaker out of North Carolina. Of course, North Carolina losing 2 of the best wide receivers in college football. Tommy Tremble, blocker. Like, if you are a football nut who breaks down film and enjoys blocking, Tommy Tremble's your guy. Carolina Panthers, tight end out of Notre Dame, is going to have to be more consistent downfield threat. I don't think he's going to stay on the field. Anyone this day and age with the proliferation of the passing game is going to stay in the field as a blocking tight end exclusively. So Tommy Tremble's going to have to improve as a downfield threat, but a devastating blocker out of Notre Dame. Chauncey Golston, classic Iowa defensive end, AJ Epinesa and company over the past few seasons. Chauncey Golston, really good player, goes to the Dallas Cowboys. Amari Rogers, most of us have seen him play quite a bit. He's played in huge games in the playoffs and generally performed. He's built like a halfback from the bottom down in regards to just strength, uncommon wide receiver strength. He's a slot guy. Amari Rogers projects that way toward the NFL. Minnesota Vikings take Wyatt Davis, guard, Ohio State. Really good player, but did not have a stellar season for the Buckeyes in 2020. Maybe some of that had to do with the truncated season, but Wyatt Davis did not have a great year, and his draft stock suffered. He drops to number 23 in the 3rd round to the Vikings. Kendrick Green out of Illinois. You must really like a player as an NFL personnel department to draft an Illinois player. He must really be sold on that guy. The Pittsburgh Steelers take guard Kendrick Green out of Illinois. And from what I saw on the tape, yeah, he's a strong dude, but pretty limited in regards to being anything but a guard. Guards are not a hot commodity in the NFL because think about it. Tackles are more athletic. So if the athleticism does not project to the NFL, they're still really athletic as guards, whereas guards pretty much are stuck at that position. Trey Sermon, Ohio State, ran like he was mad the last couple of games of the year. Trey Sermon was a really good back at Oklahoma. Actually came to Columbus and scored the touchdown that put Ohio State away in the Baker Mayfield game in 2017. Then he transfers to Ohio State after, again, a nice career at OU and has a decent start to his season, but he and Master Teague are struggling for carries and battling for carries. And then Trey Sermon gets the load against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. Actually, the week before against Michigan State, he showed, okay, I'm ready to kick it into gear. But against Northwestern, one of the best defenses in college football, and against Clemson, one of the more talented front sevens. I'm not going to say that they played great defense last year. Maybe Joe Bo can help me there. That Trey Sermon just could not be stopped, just threw dudes off of him constantly those last 2 games of the year. Unfortunately, one play against Alabama, out of the game. Not that that would have made a difference, but it would have been nice to see Trey Sermon against that Alabama defense, considering what he did in tearing up Northwestern and Clemson. Houston takes Nico Collins from Michigan. Nico Collins is a guy that Michigan fans wanted to see featured in the offense because when featured, he made plays. But as is the case with Michigan's offense under Jim Harbaugh, they don't know how to utilize their personnel. So maybe the Houston Texans can with Nico Collins from Michigan. Patrick Jones, edge rusher from Pitt. Pitt over the past few years had some of the best defensive pressure in the country. They led the nation in sacks from the defensive line position the past 2 seasons. And Patrick Jones, one of the major reasons why he goes to the Vikings. It seems like as I read through these that the Vikings are selecting like every 3 picks. Pick number 91, the Cleveland Browns take Anthony Schwartz. SEC fans, you should know about Anthony Schwartz. He is a burner, track star Olympian, but he may be not versatile enough to stay on the field because it takes more than just speed to stay on the field in the NFL, and his production at Auburn declined each season he was there. Monty Rice, really good linebacker at Georgia. Maybe Uncle Lou can fill us in a little bit more on Monty Rice, but I'm certainly was impressed with Monty Rice when I watched Georgia play football, which I do about 5, 6, 7 times per year. And Monty Rice goes to Tennessee. Buffalo, Spencer Brown, offensive tackle, Northern Iowa. I don't follow the Group of 5 or the FCS, so I don't know. Baltimore, Ben Cleveland, Georgia. This guy's tape was fun to watch. If you like just watching football, Uncle Lou says Monty Rice is not an NFL player. And here in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, basically, it's always been my understanding that if you select somebody in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, they should eventually be a starter. If you're selecting one of the top 100 players in the NFL draft, they should eventually be developed into a starter, maybe not necessarily the first season. Ben Cleveland, I loved watching his tape. He was just not. There was a sequence against Mississippi State in which there was a pass play downfield. JT Daniels hit somebody for a touchdown, and he took 2 Mississippi State dudes and he like threw one away, like in the open field. The other dude, he like pushed into the rest of the offensive line. And there were a few other plays in which he just engulfed the defender, just engulfed the guy, just flattened him. So, and he looks like you give that guy an axe and you send him out back to chop some wood for a while for you. Tampa Bay took Robert Hainsey, another offensive tackle from Notre Dame. Notre Dame had 3 selections in the span of about 40 picks. 3 selections from the offensive line in the span of about 40 picks. New England at 96 takes Ronnie Perkins, edge rusher. Not really an edge rusher. Anyway, out of Oklahoma, defensive lineman. My list says edge rusher Ronnie Perkins, New England. So finally, Bill Belichick goes elsewhere besides Alabama to take a player. And we've talked about Ronnie Perkins on here about as much as anybody else. We talk Oklahoma football once a week, and we talk about him all the time. And the Oklahoma defense improved tremendously once he showed up. LA Chargers, Trey McKitty, tight end, Georgia. Don't have a strong opinion about him. Denver, Quinn Miners. Oh, this is the guy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name because he played center at Wisconsin Whitewater. But he's the guy. Look this guy up. Quinn, Meinerz. He was out in the wilderness doing all sorts of crazy stuff. It was hilarious to watch his his Instagram or whatever it was. Dallas takes Nahshon Wright, cornerback from Oregon State. Oregon State's been pretty awful, but improving under Jonathan Smith. All right, what do you folks have? Jobo says the 49ers are loaded. Trey Lance easily is the best situation of any of these rookie quarterbacks. It's going to be pretty fascinating to see how they deal with that situation between Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. That if Garoppolo starts the season and San Francisco takes off like they did 2 years ago when they were healthy and went all the way to the Super Bowl, then maybe Lance is on the sideline and on the bench for the entire season. If either Garoppolo does what he typically does and gets hurt, of course, then maybe Lance, if he is able to grasp the offense, gets a chance. I don't know who their number 2 quarterback is right now in San Francisco. George is asking if Kirby's on the hot seat if he fails miserably again. If he finishes number 6 in the country again. Nick, how many times has Georgia beat Alabama? Not the past 3 or 4, right? Uncle Lou, Mark, who do you think is replacing Mullen next year? Let me think about that one. Shanktopotamus, Mark is a historian. He has no idea. No idea. No idea. Finish the sentence, please. Shanktopotamus. Uncle Lou, Mark, do you think Florida will ever win the SEC again? It's been 14 seasons. I think right now that Alabama's got the best program, of course, in the conference, and Georgia's number 2, and LSU is a bit of a wild card, but most likely number 3 with the talent they have, and Texas A&M's right there. And those 4 are definitely all in better position than Florida. Auburn could be very quickly. They certainly have the resources and have done it before. And then you've got a bunch of schools that, at least a couple other teams that could be primed to overtake Florida. Kentucky, Missouri. Tennessee's a mess. Long range Tennessee can, if they got the right people in place, could get back to where they would need to be. But right now there are 4 definite programs better than Florida in the SEC. And then there are a couple that are on their heels that have a better vibe right now. So with that stacked against them, it doesn't look like they're going to win an SEC championship for quite some time. Elijah Molden, cornerback Washington, goes to Tennessee. Ifiatu Melifonwu, the cornerback from Syracuse. Syracuse had 2 NFL players in the secondary from this last team that went 1-10. Ambry Thomas, another cornerback from Michigan. Ambry Thomas, he must have, yes, I was just going to say, Michigan let Rocky Lombardi throw for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns and no picks against them. Ambry Thomas opted out. That was one of the big issues for Michigan. So Ambry Thomas did not hurt himself by saying, you know what, I'm going to bypass the train wreck that's Michigan football this fall, and I'm going to sit out, prepare myself for the NFL draft, and suit up for the San Francisco 49ers. Ernest Jones, linebacker, South Carolina, goes to the Rams. Brandon Stevens, cornerback, SMU, goes to Baltimore. Baron Browning, Ohio State linebacker, goes to the Denver Broncos, but selected after Pete Werner, surprisingly. Jordan, thank you for supplementing my analysis there on Amari Rogers. Compact, but has elite speed. Excited to see how they use him. Jobo says Andre Cisco, the Syracuse defensive back, didn't play last season, but Melifonwu was probably the only good thing that Syracuse defense had. Yeah. Got a call coming in. Let's hit this one up. Got Kevin from Dallas, Georgia. Kevin, how we doing today? Hello, Kevin. Looks like we're hung up here. There we go. Kevin, how's it going tonight?
Great. How you doing, Mark?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Oh, I have shots fired in reference to, and I shouldn't take it out on the team. It should be as far as the collegiate teams, but more so, I guess, as far as the NFL teams. And the bone that I have to pick as far as the NFL, I thought that it was pretty much a given, Mark, that the University of Alabama was going to have 7 players drafted in the first round. And the guy who I thought was going to be the 7th was Christian Barmore. And it just got me when the 2 kids from the University of Miami were drafted. One, I don't have as much of a bone to pick with, but the other one, and the other one in question is Phillips. And the reason why I had reservations in reference to him was that, most NFL teams will state that they won't draft a guy because of his injury report. And I thought that his would have been more so extensive than the other 2 guys. Do I have a right to feel that way, or I'm just don't want to be tied with the University of Miami as far as 6 players being drafted in the first round, Mark?
So what did Jalen Phillips have to do with that? He was selected, about 15th?
I don't recall, Mark, because once those 2 players were drafted, I kind of shut it down as far as the selection process, and I was just saying, hey, within the next 17 selections or so, then hey, Barmore should get drafted. So.
Well, it just doesn't always come down to, of course, just pure talent. It comes down to fit and need. And those teams obviously decided that there were other options that they would go with. I know that when Gregory Rousseau was drafted, and we talked about this during my Miami live stream tonight, there was more reservation. There was more negative analysis of Gregory Rousseau when he was selected than any other player in the first round by far. Both Mel Kiper, Louis Riddick looked through his 15.5 sacks from 2 years ago, and they were not that impressed. They thought most of them were either coverage sacks or that he was competing against inferior, matched up against an offensive lineman who was not anywhere close to NFL standards, and his sack total was puffed up quite a bit.
And along those lines, Mark, the one thing that was pointed out last night was in regards to Rousseau was that most of his sacks came against the doggone guards, which I didn't hear that analysis prior to last night, because I thought defensive ends the majority of the time when they rushed the passer was against OT.
True.
I didn't know that as far as a good portion of his sacks were against guards. So.
Absolutely. And I can't really speak to that. I know that that's been a criticism by enough people that it must be true. I haven't gone back, and once I get the full staff here, Kevin, with like 15 people on hand, I'll say, you over there, go break down the 15 sacks from Gregory Rousseau in 2019 and have me look at them. But we're not quite at that level yet.
I know. It's just like I said, Mark, I was just, pretty much, hey, I had the knife sharp, and I said, hey, Alabama's going to get 7 guys tonight. And, the thing, initially, as far as the givens, as far as the guys on the offensive side. But then once, as far as Leatherwood was drafted by the Raiders, then I said, okay, we're going to get 7 tonight. And then when, as far as when Phillips, like I said, Phillips and Rousseau, and maybe, and just, I don't know. I mean, I just really just thought, Mark, that, hey, he was going to, within those next 15 or so picks, that I knew that someone needed a D tackle that could just bottle it up on the inside and, hey, allow defensive ends to run free. And I thought, as far as I know, in previous years, there was always a lean particularly as far as the Ravens when it came to University of Alabama players. And I guess, hey, when your GM is Isaac Newsom, then hey, you might would have that lean. But I know that they're as far as under new management now. But hey, it's all said and done. Hey, we're tied as far as 6 all time as far as first round draft choices, and it's going to be a little while before we have 6 in the first round. But hey, as far as next year, Evan Neal will be a first round choice, and be a few other guys, but definitely as far as Evan Neal.
I would be pretty happy with that haul. You could be the Big 12 who had no first round picks, the entire conference.
Yes, but sometimes when you suffer from the disease of more, Mark, it is what it is. I mean, hey, and we just when the players started getting drafted, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then once we got to the 6th, and I said, hey, we're gonna get a 7 within the next 17 choices, Mark. I mean, hey, I just felt it. I felt it in my bones, Mark. Felt it in my bones. But hey, there'll be another time, I guess. Probably, let's see, this is 21, so I'm thinking about maybe 24, 25. It might be to get 7, but won't be in the next couple of years. But I was also surprised as far as your buck nuts, as far as the number of second and third round choices. And the thing is, just as you stated, I mean, hey, when you're drafted in the top 3 rounds, hey, development, and then within X amount of years, you should be able to be productive NFL players. I mean, and I looked at a lot of the guys more so on the O-line that were highly touted as far as coming out of high school, and it was good to see them get their shine as far as tonight, and hey, wind up being 10, 12-year veterans.
I hear you, Kevin. Got anything else for me?
Well, just hey, it's going. I just briefly, Mark. It's in reference to someone questioning as far as who will be the next coach at the University of Florida, as well as hey, the last when will the time come as far as the University of Florida being able to win the SEC? And make a long story short, Mark, no time soon. Because number one, you have to have a commitment not only by the university, but hey, you have to have a commitment at least by the coach. And I don't think I think Mullen wants the prestige and the position of being the coach of the University of Florida, and even I have to question that at times. But as far as him wanting to, put forth that effort as far as winning, forget just winning the SEC, but just winning the doggone East. It just seems for whatever reason, Mark, that Mullen can't get out of his own way.
He's recruiting like an 8-4 team in the SEC, and that's obviously not good enough. Now, this past season, it certainly had the look as they came within 1 score of Alabama, but he put together an offensive unit that, unless he's able to duplicate that, but that's going to be a tall task. It appeared as though he put together the quarterback with the offensive skill position players, and obviously a freak at tight end that he's not going to get back in Kyle Pitts. That was just lightning in a bottle, that they were just that explosive and effective and efficient in the passing game that he's to be able to duplicate that is going to be rare. And he's now recruiting at the level that he has to at the other positions, both offensively and defensively, to overcome the drop off that they're going to take in the passing game.
Would it be safe to say, Mark, when it comes to Coach Mullen, that he is more so a coach who can work with less than a person who can work with more?
It's possibly looking that way. It's possibly looking that way. And that is the mark of a lot of coaches. And they succeed. We could run through a list of guys that have succeeded at certain places, and it appears as though that they were headed toward great things because they've gone to certain locations and taken marginal talent and gone to bowl games and won 7 or 8 games, and then they get flooded with riches, both monetarily and in terms of roster talent at their next stop, and they're able to coach up lesser talent, but they're not able to utilize and challenge. Sometimes you got to challenge great talent to be great, where the 3 stars are eager and they're anxious and they're not assuming anything. So they're eager and anxious to be coached up because they know they've got to work and grind. But you bring in a bunch of 5 stars and you got to challenge those guys to be, they can be good just off sheer talent. But that's not going to win that's not going to win the SEC or get to a playoff. And then to challenge them to be great, to squeeze every ounce of ability out of them, to be as good as they possibly can be, that takes a pretty special culture built by a pretty special leader. And that's why we only see it a few places.
And along those lines, Mark, I was just, what a difference a few months make. And that is, when you look at the conference, SEC, that is, and you would have thought that the death knell would have been, the drums would have been beaten as far as Ogeron. And the thing is, because of the recruiting that they had this past year, and then the recruiting that they're having now, and if they have a doggone, say, 9+1 season, he's good for the next few years. And then when you look across the landscape, as far as Mullen as well as Harbaugh, I can't really see Mullen winning. I could see 7+1 at best, 8+1. And then Harbaugh, I really can't see Harbaugh finishing better than doggone 6+1. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see as far as what direction the Florida fan base is going to go in as far as the coach, as well as the Michigan fan base. Because the one thing I say as far as Michigan, forget this doggone Michigan man. You need to get somebody that's going to bring the institution to the way that, as far as what you want, and not just as far as this Michigan man thing. Because as has been previously shown, Harbaugh just not getting the job done. And as far as Mullen is concerned, I just don't understand. I mean, I really thought, Mark, that it was going to be some competition as far as in the East, but in order to have competition, Mark, you have to have an opponent. And right now, as far as the East, Georgia don't have an opponent. Georgia won't have an opponent as far as the SEC until the doggone SEC championship game.
It doesn't look that way. It doesn't appear that way, but let's understand that Dan Mullen did take over a 4-win team, and he got him to 10-3 with a major bowl win, then to 11-2 with a major bowl win. And that despite all the stupid things that he did last year and all the stupid things that he said, that he was the only team in the country to take Alabama to a 1-score game, he did win the East. He did beat Georgia. Now, I agree. As I stated off the top, it looks like that team is gone, and it's going to be difficult for him to replicate that offensive machine. So it does appear that that was an aberration, and Georgia's going to reclaim the East and just keep moving on. But he did get them there to the brink, and technically they are the East champions right now. We'll see if they can sustain it. It doesn't look good. I agree. It doesn't look good.
Would this Florida offense 21-22, Mark, be more the Dak Prescott offense at Mississippi State? Because I can't see it being half what their offense was last year.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then Mark, what would you be looking at as far as a record then?
Our guy, David Waters at Gators Breakdown, believes that Emory Jones is a better passer than Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State. And I think that's arguable. I've not seen enough of Emory Jones. I don't think anybody's seen enough of him, because the way he's been utilized, unlike Justin Fields, at least they let him throw the ball when he entered the games at Florida. But they gave him, if you noticed, a very limited package of pass patterns that they would allow him to throw. They wouldn't let him make difficult throws to the sidelines. Everything was like a screen or it was a slant. They'd let him throw to the middle of the field or give him some kind of bootleg where somebody drag with him like a tight end and they'd be wide open. So he's going to have the full package of plays and be able to execute all those throws. But we can just about guarantee that he's not Kyle Trask when it comes to delivering the ball on time and accurately and making quick reads and quick decisions. So yeah, and they don't have, and we saw last night where Kyle Pitts was drafted. That just never happens. A tight end taken in the first 5 picks of the NFL draft, or I think he was 6th. So they lost a once in a generation type tight end. And Kadarius Toney was the 20th pick in the first round. Yeah, they're going to, and they couldn't run the ball last year. And I don't necessarily, they're going to run the ball more this year. They're going to attempt more runs. I don't know that they're going to be better running the ball. They've got the same backs, although they have added DeMarcus Bowman, the 5-star from Clemson. But the offensive lines, again, it's good. They've got good talent, but we're matching them up against Georgia, and Georgia has one of the top 3 rosters in the country. So it looks like 8-4 to me.
Well, the question is this, Marcus. Do you believe in the DC for the University of Florida?
I don't. No, I think they should have made a move there. They should have made a move. They should have cut him loose. I don't know what happened there. They had the perfect opportunity to cut him loose, and they're Florida. They should be able to go get a top 5 to 10 defensive coordinator, one of the best in the country, match him up with what Mullen can do on offense and go to it. Mullen doesn't want to deal with that side of the ball. He should be able to hire one of the very best, a Dave Aranda type, and be able to put him on that side of the ball and say, coach him up and scheme it up and deliver a top. Shoot, when Will Muschamp was there, he delivered top 5 to 10 defenses. It was the exact opposite. They couldn't score. They had putrid passing games and they couldn't score, but they had great defensive play when Muschamp and to a certain extent McElwain were there.
Well, in conclusion, Mark, I feel that when it comes to pretty much across the board, is that the team that is going to win the national championship this year is going to be a team that's going to lean heavily on the defensive side of the ball. Even when it comes to the scripted white A or the scripted red A, their strength coming into the 21-22 season will be on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, it's going to be 3 or 4 deep. And then as far as the offensive side of the ball, it's going to be somewhat back to the future, as in being able to, run that ball, shoot 25, 30 times. And then in doing so, it'll give, as far as Bryce, the opportunity to get his sea legs under him, and hey, we can, possibly go back to back. But it's going to be interesting season. And also, Mark, I was going to ask you in reference as far as Bucknuts, as far as how you feel about him as far as this coming season.
Oh, I think they'll be fine against the Big Ten. Somebody asked me a couple nights ago whether the second string at Ohio State could win the Big Ten, and I said that would be fascinating to see, as long as they supplied the rest of the roster with enough backups to fill out the roster. It would be fascinating if they sent all the first stringers home to see if they could still win the Big Ten. I think it would be fascinating. But anyway, in the real world, out of 3 high-end, high 4 and 5-star quarterbacks, they should be able to find one, and it's probably going to be CJ Stroud to be the starting quarterback that they need. And I think that they have enough of a talent gap on everybody else that they could be a much better team in November than they were in September. I don't think that they're going to be a top 2 or 3 team in September, but I think that they've got an opportunity to be that when it counts. And in the meantime, have enough of a buffer against everybody else in the Big Ten. They've got some decent teams to face that if they're not on playing at least a C plus or a B minus, they could lose to. But their C game should still beat everybody else in the Big Ten enough for them to win the conference. And then if all goes well and Ryan Day knows what he's doing, which he does, and they develop everyone, and once all these inexperienced players have 10 and 11 games under their belts, be ready for a playoff push.
So would it be safe to say whether it is in the next few months or at the conclusion of the season that Jack Miller would be the odd man out?
Yes. He still has a bright future.
Because whether it's old,
he's the odd man out.
Yeah, because I mean, whether it's the old math or the new math, Mark, I can't see as far as those three quarterbacks plus Quinn Ewers. So I don't see Quinn Ewers, backing out of his commitment as far as Ohio State. I see him still going. I don't see him going to Texas. So by that being the case, Quinn's in, Jack's got to be out, then it just be a matter of say a 2.5 man competition as far as for the job next year. That is always a pleasure, Mark.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Continue doing what you're doing. Enjoy it. And, hey, look forward to talking with you soon.
Appreciate that, sir. All right, let's hit up Derek here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Derek, how's it going?
I'm good. Yourself, sir?
I'm doing well. You would like to talk about BYU?
Oh, no, sir. No, thanks for taking my call. I may have missed this discussion yesterday potentially, but I wanted to ask you, get your take on potential first round quarterback bust of this draft. I'll kind of walk the plank first. I personally believe it's Trey Lance. I would have taken Justin Fields ahead of Lance personally. In fact, I would have taken Justin Fields second overall to the Jets if I was the GM. But I know they drafted Trey Lance on basically his upside. He only played in 17 games, and none of those games were against FCS opponents, which makes him, in my opinion, kind of unproven. But if you're looking at upside, why not just take Justin Fields? I mean, he's a lot more polished and proven. And I don't know. That's my opinion on as far as him potentially being a bust. As far as that being Trey Lance, I hope he does. I mean, I love to see him succeed, but I don't know. I just don't see him being the answer there.
It's odd that when the college football season started, that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields were considered the two best quarterbacks, 1 and 1A, and most people considered Lawrence to have a slight edge, but that they were going to be drafted 1 and 2 in the NFL draft. And Lawrence kept that position with the season that he had. Justin Fields had 2 somewhat questionable performances, but if you really watched the Indiana game, I wasn't that concerned about that game. There was one bad throw that he made, and it wasn't a bad throw. It was a beautiful throw. It was just a bad decision. He threw the ball late down the middle on a seam route, and the safety just waited and baited him and picked it off. But the other ones were just him being athletic and running around and trying to make a play when he should have just thrown the ball away. They weren't bad. They were bad decisions, but not bad decisions because he was fooled by a coverage. And then the Northwestern game, I wasn't that concerned about his performance against Northwestern because they were all over him. The pass rush was relentless in that game. And then he did what he did against Clemson, which was remarkable. And the championship game against Alabama, I neither thought that he should have upgraded his draft status or downgraded it. I thought he was overmatched. Or his team was. I thought he played relatively well in that game. He had to shoulder the entire off. To compare him and Mac Jones in that game is not fair because Mac Jones had his first round running back healthy, and Wyatt Davis was just taken in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, and he got hurt in the beginning of the second quarter of that game. And of course, Trey Sermon got hurt on the first play of the game. And they were playing from behind. And I just thought Justin Fields did a relatively decent job of hanging in there. So, yeah, the thing with Trey Lance is it's difficult to evaluate film when the talent on the field is far less than what is being watched with everybody else. And the analysts don't seem to care about it. They care about it with certain players. They'll bring it up. Well, it's tough to evaluate the film because he's so much better than everybody else on the field. But with Trey Lance, they didn't do that. And everything I saw looked impressive. But again, everything I saw, I didn't see. So I've never watched the guy play a football game. And let's also understand, and you know this, that he's only played one football game in the last year and a half. They played a game against Central Arkansas this year, and they didn't play any other games in 2020. So he hasn't played since the end of 2019. And everything over the last, I'd say 3 to 4 days, I watched quite a bit of draft coverage, and I've probably seen him throw 20 or 22 passes, and just about everybody was wide open. So I don't know what that tells you. That doesn't tell me much, that he can throw a ball to a guy streaking. Yeah, he's got a good arm. That's all that tells me. He's got an NFL arm that he can throw the ball 45 or 50 yards to a guy that's got like an 8-yard advantage on the defender. But that doesn't tell me that he can read a defense or make an accurate throw under pressure, or that he can, throw to a tight window or anticipate a throw or an opening. As you well know, in the NFL, most of these throws, I think it's fascinating to watch these NFL games when they take the shot from behind the quarterback on the I can't think of the sky cam shot, and you see where the players are when the quarterback makes the decision to make the throw. Like, they're nowhere close to where they're going to be when that ball arrives. That's how much they have to be able to anticipate where the receiver is and where the defenders are and what throwing lane they have when they release it. It's totally different than what I saw him playing against for the past 3 days in watching his film.
Well, I know, Trey Lance, I know he won a national championship as a redshirt freshman at NDSU in 2019. And then he just played in that one game in 2020, that one game during the fall against Central Arkansas. And that's where all the scouts converged to watch him. And he actually had a bad game in that game, quite frankly. But I don't know. I just, again, they drafted him based on his upside. But, I really don't know why, if that was the case, why not have taken Justin Fields, quite frankly. I mean, he's just a lot more proven and polished, and he proved it on the field in two different schools. If you're looking at just the upside, but I don't know if you don't mind to switch gears. I know you mentioned before a couple of days ago about your 16-team college football playoff. I missed a little bit of that discussion, but were you looking at potentially having the conference champions from the Power Five and this group of five in the playoff field, and then maybe 6 at-large teams?
If I was going to go 16 teams, which that's the way I would go if this was a video game. If we were playing on paper or playing a video game and it didn't involve actual humans who had to take a beating on the field, miss class, and all of that, I would love to see 16 teams, because at one point about 2 or 3 months ago, we did a live stream and I mapped out my research on what a 16-team playoff in different formats would have looked like over the last 7 years. And the matchups are just crazy good. They're just fun for a college football fan. Auburn, Michigan kind of matchups all over the place. Penn State and Florida, Michigan type of matchups all over the place. But in a real world, I think 8's more realistic. But if we get back to the 16, the way I would do it is I would include every conference champion, all 10, and 6 at-large wildcards that would be focused on, it would be focused on, let me explain, but I'll finish, record, and then any head-to-head That's usually pretty rare. And then number 3 would be strength of record. But there would have to be some kind of component to give the group of 5 an opportunity. Well, no. Let me back up. I'd go the 10 conference champions, then I go 6 wild cards, and they would all be Power 5 teams.
Okay. Yeah, I know I heard some discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, I apologize. It's been so long since I kind of talked myself through that. Because in actuality, if that were the format, this is what we would be watching. We'd be watching the 11 best teams in the country, because those would be the 5 Power 5 conference champions and the 6 wild cards. And then we would see probably a gap down to maybe the 17th, 18th, 19th best team in the country, which would typically be like the American Conference champion. And then we'd see another drop to the other 3. Would it be 3 or 4? Maybe a Boise State out of the Mountain West would be a top 25 type team. And then we would see a pretty drastic drop to a lot of teams that are realistically the 45th, 55th best teams of the country out of Conference USA and the Sun Belt. And I would have no issue with that myself.
Yeah, I think one upside of that too is then you have the entire college football landscape engaged in the playoffs. You know, I think it'll draw in a lot more, because I don't mind the 14 format, quite to be honest with you, but I think, but also the teams that don't get to the playoffs, you know, they kind of, you know, aren't engaged in bowl games. You know, they just kind of quit. You know, they don't, you know, players opt out and stuff. But I think if you have more teams engaged in in a larger format, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that format where you have the conference champions get automatic bids, and then, you know, 6 at-large teams. You know, those first round games, you know, you're going to see a lot of lopsided matches, but I think eventually they may catch up to the other teams. You might have some upsets down the road, but I wouldn't mind seeing that myself, to be honest with you.
Can you imagine, Derek, whether it would take the first year, or maybe it might take 3 years or 5 years or even 10 years, but the first time we would have a matchup where, let's say, Appalachian State has a 3-point lead on USC midway through the 4th quarter, that kind of drama. And again, it might take 5 or 10 years to see it, but it would happen at some point. That would be, to me, to sit through some first round games that were 45-10. And let's understand, they wouldn't all be like that. UAB would give Oklahoma a game, just like Army has and others have in the first round. That would happen on a fairly, I'm not going to say regular basis, but more often than maybe we anticipate. But to be able to sit through some blowouts in the first round, and then we'd have some great 8-9 type matchups and 7-10 matchups, in addition to a few 116, 215 blowouts. To sit through those would be fine with me, because we'd have enough great games. And then again, that first time that we would have a UAB taking Ohio State to the 4th quarter in a tie game, even if it took 5 to 10 years, would be well worth it for me to be like, okay, this is phenomenal.
Oh yeah. And then I know the other thing is, I think I heard you say on your last discussion that, you know, the first round games would be held on the college campuses. I don't know if somehow they can incorporate some of the bowl games into the quarterfinals or second round games, and then, you know, the top 4 playoff teams, you know, those bowl formats, you know, for the semifinals potentially. But yeah, no, I think that would be unbelievable to see that. You know, just like when you saw Michigan play Appalachian State, when Appalachian State beat Michigan at home. I mean, you know, something like that would be pretty phenomenal. Seeing that, you know, here and there, some teams picking off some bigger teams. That'd be pretty good.
Derek, what some people don't seem to understand is the first backlash I get to a 16-team playoff is that it would cause there to be too many games that were meaningless in the regular season. Okay. My counterpoint to that is that those people are focusing on Alabama and possibly Georgia and Ohio State being 10-0 late in the season and being able to lose a game and still reach the playoffs, and saying those games would be meaningless, where now they are meaningful. And they're focusing on like 2 or 3 games that would suddenly be meaningless, supposedly, under a 16-team playoff system. But think of the dozens and dozens and dozens of games that would suddenly be meaningful that otherwise are meaningless toward a championship, that would be meaningful because teams that were 9-2 or 10-2 late in the season would have an opportunity to play themselves into the playoff. And also, we would discourage those potential meaningless games by the top 3 or 4 teams in the country late in the season by giving first round on-campus games to the best teams. So, you know what? If you're undefeated late in the season, and if you are thinking about giving up a game and not playing hard, do you want to go to Madison, Wisconsin in December and play a playoff game, or go to Seattle, Washington, or Columbus, Ohio and play a playoff game in December? Maybe not.
Well, I think the other thing too, it would also encourage and put more of a premium on winning your conference. You know, if you get automatic bids for the conference champions, it puts a bigger premium on that. And then I think they could still use the strength of schedule formulas and other things to determine the at-large bids. But I don't know. It would be interesting if it ever develops into that. But I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind, quite frankly, if it did expand to that. But I was personally, when they were developing the whole playoff format, I was hoping they would use the conference champion would get automatic bids. But when there was only 4 teams, it kind of changed that dynamic. But I would rather see that develop into where a conference champion that favors the conference champion getting automatic bids into a slot there for a 16-team format. I don't know. I don't know. I think that would be pretty cool if it ever develops into that personally. But who am I? I'm just a cog in the wheel.
Well, Derek, we appreciate the call, and I'm going to move on to some other callers here. But thank you so much for the call. It was a good one.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your help. Thank you.
All right. Shanktopotamus says that Trey Lance is the best quarterback in the draft. I'm not saying that he's not. I'm just saying that he played inferior competition and that it's difficult to scout. Kyle Shanahan said that much in an interview. He had a really good interview with Scott Van Pelt last night during SportsCenter. Shanahan and Lynch were interviewed on SVP, and basically they said, and Shanahan was very upfront about this. He said, yeah, we're concerned about that. We're concerned he's only played a game in the last year and a half. We're concerned that he didn't play the competition that we could rate against a Power 5 type quarterback who played that level of competition. Yeah, but we went with, he said, and was very honest and open about basically saying, we crunch the numbers and we use our eyes to evaluate the skills, and we go through all the measurements of the pro day. And then we also go with our gut and go with our instincts based on the conversations and the interviews we have with the young man. But we're also taking an educated guess. He kept saying that guess. He didn't even say educated much of the time. He said, we're taking a guess. We're taking a guess based on the information that we have and based on our gut. And based on the success rate of first-round quarterbacks in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan was being very open and authentic and accurate, because with all the money and all the resources and all the measurements and all the data and all the hours that they put into this and all the expertise of the scouts, they still miss it more than they hit on it. All right, we got DeAndre coming on the line. Let's go to him. DeAndre, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. Hey, man, I'm kind of drowsy, so I'm going to need for you to follow me a little bit here.
Okay, we'll do it.
So, we're talking about Trey Lance and Fields, and I felt that was unfair that Fields dropped that for it because I don't see what Zach Wilson has done over his career compared to what Fields has done. But I also like to make this comment too. Most of the best quarterbacks outside of Tom Brady, a lot of them came from small schools. I mean, Brett Favre, Terry Bradshaw, Warren Moon took a weird way to come to the big time. I mean, some of these guys come from small schools and are better than the guys that actually came from big time schools. And I give you a perfect example. Like Jake Locker coming out of Washington, came in now when he came out of UCLA, Jay Rosen. Everybody said, oh, how great these quarterbacks are going to be. Like you said, they have a poor, how do you say it? A poor performance when they get to the pros. It's like, why? And you done heard how great they were. I mean, I remember when people were comparing Jay Locker to Steve Young. And he's going to be just like Steve Young. Hey, when you get him, it's like, this is what we're waiting for? I mean, I don't think we're too hard on the process of getting quarterbacks. I think we just overvalue quarterbacks for a long period of time. Look at Peyton Manning, probably considered the best quarterback as far as being by the way he thought the game, the way he looked at the game. And if we be honest with you, he only led one team. That Indianapolis Colts team. That's the only one that he was responsible for winning the championship. How many times did he choke up against the Steelers or the Chargers? I mean, I just think that we give quarterbacks too much value. And everybody said, well, they're the one that's the face of the team. But when Jared Goff and Wentz got their money, they were the reasons why their teams went down. Because they started paying them. So I just think we give quarterbacks way too much credit and way too much blame, too.
Well,
sometimes just like I think Seth Donald's going to do a little bit better. But go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Well, I think you got a point there. I think we do as well. I don't think it's extremely an extreme case of giving them way too much value, but I think we do give them slightly too much value. And I think because of that, teams reach for quarterbacks who are just projected to be decent players, and they reach for them in the first 10 picks of the draft. And then it turns out to be a Goff. And Goff's a decent quarterback. He's not great. We just got to see how much value the NFL puts in Jared Goff. If a much older Matthew Stafford is traded player for player for Jared Goff, plus the Rams have to give up 2 first rounders and a third, plus a much younger player. Wow. I forgot about that. That trade passed me by at the time. I don't know what I was doing. And I knew that they got traded for each other and there were draft picks. But tonight I saw it back on the screen and I thought, Goff's that much younger than Stafford's. He's been in the league. What? He was in maybe the 2009 draft. He's got a lot of mileage on him. Like, he's not a kid, and he's going to get 2 first rounders and a third in addition to him. That's how much he's being valued. And Goff's not awful. Yeah, I'm not a big Jared Goff fan, but he's not a disaster. He's fine. He's good. He's probably a top 12 to 15 quarterback in the NFL. He wasn't worth the number 1 pick in the draft, or number 2. Was he 2? No, he was 1. Yeah, Wentz was 2.
Yeah.
But
see, that's another problem that I have. I heard Patrick Mahomes have a conversation about when he first came in the NFL. I might be getting the story wrong, but he couldn't even tell you where the sale linebacker was. And he had a 6. So maybe Trey Lance, because honestly, I don't know. You follow it more deeper than I do. Did you even hear about Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech when he was there? I mean, I really didn't hear about this guy. And, you know, now he's one of the best quarterbacks. I mean, I just think, you know, people that are on the San Francisco 49ers for what happened with Trey Lance, for taking Trey Lance, I think they're just being over. Like, let's get a guy fits, right? He fits into the system. And maybe he's going to sit behind Jimmy G for a year. I mean, Tony Romo was what? He wasn't even drafted. And look at him. And look at him. And I said, look at what he's doing now. So I just think we didn't get any teams. Prescott, one of the highest paid players. And I didn't think he was that great at Mississippi State. I didn't think he was going to do that with the Cowboys. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I didn't think Dak Prescott was anything special coming out of college. I didn't think that he was that good, and now he's become a good NFL quarterback. Not a great one, but he's a decent one. He's a good one. And what do you – I don't know if you heard the conversation that I had before this, but I thought that the interview that Kyle Shanahan and what he had to say last night was very, very meaningful. Like, most of these interviews are just a waste of time because nobody's going to say anything or give up anything. But he was very honest. He was very honest to say, I'm concerned with Lance only playing one game in the last year and a half. I'm concerned about the competition level. And he was very open about, it's a guess. We do the best we can. We got to go with our evaluation on tape. We got to go with the measurables. We go, he said, it's mostly tape. It's most what do they have on tape? But then we combine that with the measurements of the 40 times and the throws during the pro day and all the measurements. And then we interview the player, and we want to know how much they love football, how much they know about football, how much we believe that they can possibly learn, that they've got, you know, an ability to grasp information and process it quickly and do all those things that are needed in a pressure situation. And then we take a guess. And he kept saying it's a guess. And I think maybe I think maybe a coach like him that really loves to scheme and call plays wanted a mobile quarterback, so he wasn't going to take Mac Jones. People were talking about them taking Mac Jones. And then he also wants maybe he wants a project. Maybe he wants somebody that he can really mold and develop and prove that he can make anybody a great quarterback. I don't know.
I would say this about Justin Fields. And you know, I was big high on Justin Fields over the last 2 years that me and you've been talking. Can I ask you what was the difference between him and Trevor Lawrence coming out of high school? And I wanted us to take off the colored glasses of me being a Clemson fan, you being an Ohio State fan. Somebody brought up a good point. I know he couldn't beat out Jake Fromm at Georgia, but all we saw him was handing off the ball. This year, and a lot of Clemson fans say this, and I think it's unfair in a way, but, well, they had all this time to prepare for Clemson. They knew they were going to get in the playoffs. They knew that the Big Ten was going to change their rules. So they knew they were going to probably play Clemson. So they had a longer chance to get ready for that. So maybe that's what really hurt him at the end of the day. Maybe that's what they were looking at, because he couldn't beat out Fromm, who was a fifth-round pick by the Bills, who I'm hearing is going to get cut, because I think they took Trubisky over there. And then he had a shortened week. 6 months. And then somebody said he had, I think you guys said epilepsy. Did you hear about that too?
I did hear that. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, I was like, wow. I'm just kind of figuring, like, why is this dude getting all this bad publicity? And I just heard somebody bring up those points. I'm like, well, I never thought about it like that. And he wasn't a Clemson fan, but he was like, I mean, they had 6 weeks to get ready for. They had a longer time to study what Clemson was doing, and maybe that's why they played a perfect game compared to just playing the game. Everybody playing 12 games, and I don't think that's fair, because Kirby has always messed up the quarterback situation. We saw it this year where him started Bennett for a long time instead of going ahead and started JT Davis and running Newman off. So, I mean, we just know Kirby's terrible with quarterbacks. I mean, I just think Justin Fields, everybody needs to chill, but I just think Justin Fields didn't get a raw deal because I don't think Zach Wilson, that's the one everybody should be complaining about because Zach Wilson is not better than Justin Fields. I mean, every time Zach Wilson went up against a team that was equal in talent or better, he struggled. That's the one that everybody should be saying something about. Now, I understand that if Zach Wilson was there, San Francisco would have took him. And the coach at the Jets is similar. Is coming from the background of the 49ers. So maybe that's why they wanted him. But I just don't see what the big deal was. Because he struggled against Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina, no tackle was like 5'8", 265. So I'm like, what is it that y'all seeing on that, that I don't see? I mean, I just don't see it. That's why I would have been more, that's why I think more people should be outraged about. And Matt Jones, I made this point to you before. I know you got to go. But what was the difference between what the talent that Tua had? I think Tua had a more talented offense around him compared to what Matt Jones had. So I just don't see, and people are trying to say Tua's going to be at the league. So I don't really see the big hype about Matt Jones because a lot of people are not big on Tua. They all say that he kind of, he's not as good as he looks. So,
apparently, the Alabama receivers this year, Waddle and Devontae Smith, both said that Mac Jones was better than Tua.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, four. Think about it. That's why I say I hope one day you or somebody else breaks down those teams because they had Judy Smith, Ruggs, and Waddle. Now, to me, Waddle was the best out of all of them. I mean, I know Devontae Smith won the Heisman, but I personally, Devontae Smith was the best. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, not Devontae Smith, but Waddle. I think Waddle was better than all of them. That dude's just fast, and I don't see how Clemson beat them like they did. And that's why I say I wish we would do a breakdown of those two teams, like the differences. But I like when we're over the summertime when ain't nothing going on. I think that would make a great video.
Well, DeAndre, I got to tell you that I would like to build a channel with nothing but breakdowns like that and do that constantly. And I'm looking at all sorts of different breakdowns. I want to rate every position in the country and every conference. I started looking at ACC and Big 12 quarterbacks today and started rankings there. From jumping in the Florida State and Miami live streams that they have a constant argument over the 2001 Miami Hurricanes and the 2013 Seminoles. And I'm going to match those up. And I want to dive into all these different debates and arguments and breakdowns concerning these teams. But and I'd like to break down all the national champions over the last 20 years and try to get a barometer on who might be the best teams and the teams that didn't win the national championships that maybe were capable of, and all sorts of things like that.
I wish you had a chance to do it, but I know that's hard work. People need to start contributing more money to you. Because the stuff that you put out there, Paul Feinbaum and them ain't talking about that, they're biased. All of them need to put out more money to you, even if it's $2. I need to see you more money for the work that you do out there. And I want to know people that get money all the time.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And I can afford to do it. I know, but I'm just saying, to those that's listening to Assault right now, this is top notch. This is what college football is about. Debate. I mean, playing on the field for championships too. So who was better? I mean, everybody wants to know that. Well, in your opinion, I break down the numbers. Because that team, that 2018 team that Clemson beat Alabama with. There was an article out about their numbers, and their numbers are better than Alabama's and LSU's the last 2 years, according to that article.
Well, for example, DeAndre.
Nobody's talking about that.
Yep. For example, the other day, there's so much debate about DBU. And you know that I've got a lot of Miami, Florida State, Florida, Ohio State, LSU people that get into these chats. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to break down the defensive backs at all those schools in the past 10 years. And I added Alabama, even though people don't bring up Alabama, they're drafting and producing such talent at every position that they should be included now. Yeah. So I went through the last 10 NFL drafts, and I started with Ohio State and LSU. I got through Ohio State and LSU, and I started on Florida, and I thought, my goodness, by the time, and I just don't want to present something that says this is where these guys were drafted, because then I want to also measure their play in college. I want to measure their play in the NFL, because you might have 10 NFL draft picks, but they all were busts, versus somebody else had 8, but 5 of them turned out to be tremendous players. So I wanted to break all that down. Then I thought, this is going to take me hours and hours and hours and hours. And I don't mind doing it. I love doing it. But how many people are going to watch this video? I don't know. Is it going to pay off for me to spend 5, 6, 7 hours of research and produce a video, and I get 400 or 500 views, and that's not really going to do it for me. So I got to make those kind of business decisions.
Oh yeah, but I understand, Mark. I mean, the stuff that you do is great, but I'm just saying, as somebody, I don't have the time that you have to do it. And my kids are young, and they play sports, and I work 2 jobs. But I try to do my own channel sometimes, and I don't post that much. And you do this every day with some great people. I mean, I might not agree with everything they say. I like, dang, I wish I was up there today, but I don't do the research that they do. And our clips of researchers outside of Jason and the governor Southland, we got to get better at it, because a lot of times we just spouting out opinions, crazy opinions sometimes, about stuff that we don't even got no facts to back it up.
No doubt.
I mean, I love the guys, but yeah, I admit it. But hey, man. Well, Mark, I give somebody else a chance to call in, man. Thank you. And I'll keep watching and supporting.
Appreciate that, DeAndre. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, folks, we've had a nice little show for the last hour and 37 minutes here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for all your questions. No, I could not get to all of them in the chat, of course, with people calling on the phone. That always takes priority. And if you attach a super chat to your question, I definitely get to all of those comments and all of those questions. Keep in mind that even with the NFL draft going on through Saturday, that tomorrow is a huge spring practice day in college football. We've got Notre Dame and Nebraska in particular, and let me look up to see who else is playing tomorrow. It's a pretty impressive list of teams, and it's really the last Saturday that's going to be loaded with spring football games. And I'm going to do as many spring football reports as possible. And again, I've got to kind of weigh the time element versus how much it's going to pay off, because last weekend I watched North Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas, Boston College, Michigan State, and I recorded Pitt and a few others, and I produced some videos, and not necessarily did they do well, so it's kind of a waste of time to do some of those. But I will definitely come on here live after the Notre Dame and Nebraska spring games, after I watch those, and I should be able to watch those live. And then I also know that Minnesota's got a spring game coming up tomorrow as well. In fact, tonight was Colorado, Army, SMU, and Fresno State. Tomorrow we've got Kent State, Ball State, Texas San Antonio, Virginia, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Kansas, UMass, UNLV, and again, Minnesota. And so I'll highlight definitely Notre Dame, Nebraska, and Minnesota, and possibly if I can find any highlights and information on Oregon, Washington, and Virginia, I will get to them as well. All right. And we'll do some live shows. So please subscribe. Hopefully you're already subscribed, but if you're not, please subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live and when we're dropping new content, which is several times per day. And we typically go live a number of times throughout the day as well. Also, if you're a fan of, listen up, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Alabama, Texas A&M, Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Miami, Oklahoma, Texas, Oregon, or USC, we've got channels for all those teams. So number one, if you enjoy any one of those particular teams, please subscribe to those channels. But if you just want to help out the cause, go to a channel that's nearing 1,000 views. And the one in particular would be Florida State. Florida State's about 15 subs away from 1,000 views. So if you could head on over to our Voice of College Football Florida State channel and subscribe there, push us over 1,000 subs. That's very important to anybody who follows YouTube and knows anything about the algorithms. It's important that we get past 1,000 subs. And even if you don't want to subscribe long term, push us past 1,000. Wait till we get to about 1,200, then unsubscribe if you'd like. But make sure we get well past 1,000 and unsubscribe. But please go to Florida State and subscribe. And also to Nebraska and Oregon. Nebraska's charging hard. We're doing well on that channel. We're at around 750 subs, and Oregon's around 890, somewhere in that range. So please push us past 1,000, both on Oregon and Nebraska. And of course, as I posted just a few minutes ago, please, if you've got a few bucks, of course, we've got the availability at PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. But I will be back here on Saturday afternoon and Saturday night talking college football with you right here at the Voice of College Football. See you tomorrow.